The Virtual Curbside is a production of the Utah chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Utah AAP, working together to improve children's lives through education, advocacy, and networking. Hi, this is Paul Wirkus from the Utah AAP. Welcome to this week's edition of the Virtual Curbside, where we bring pediatric providers together with subspecialists to get smarter about all things pediatric and better acquainted as a community of caregivers. The Virtual Curbside is brought to you in part by a generous grant from Primary Children's Hospital. Primary Children's Hospital, the child first and always. Welcome back to the Virtual Curbside. This is your host, Paul Wirkus. This is the fourth week that we're talking about quality improvement and parenting issues that we've talked about. It's been a fascinating discussion so far. And this week, we're fortunate, as sort of a wrap-up episode, to be able to talk to two very estimable people. First of all, we're going to be talking to Dr. Quang-Tuyen Nguyen, known to our friends and colleagues as Q, and Dr. Neal Davis, who is known to his friends and colleagues as Dr. Neal Davis. So welcome, both of you. Before we dive in, do either of you have any financial disclosures to make?
No.
Terrific. For people who have listened to the podcast before, this all started in Neal's brain, actually, because we were trying to figure out how to do something with more electronic outreach to our members. And Neal said, why don't you just do a podcast? And nearly 8 years later, we're trying. So thanks for the idea, Neal.
That's about all I did was the idea. But
no, it was great. Yeah, it was terrific. Let's just start with a little bit of overarching stuff. Looking back on the whole notion of parenting and what pediatricians can do to help with parenting, what do you think we should be thinking about in terms of what we can achieve in childhood mental health?
I'll jump into this. I've been a pediatrician for about, is it 15 years now? Something along the lines. Been around the block a few times. Been in a couple different health systems. And one of the things I love about our field is the approach towards evidence and data and screening. And you can really say over the last 10 to 12 years in particular, we've done top-notch job of screening for things, right? Screening to see if you have depression, screening to see if you have autism, screening to see if you have a language delay. And while we've done a really good job of that and recognizing who might have health issues that need further intervention, I also feel like there's a population of children who just need that steady nurturance through the years. But because they're healthy enough, they don't always get that attention. And the work I do in relational health, my hope is that it really supports every single family, wherever they may be. In some cases, it may be with kids with complex health needs. In other cases, it's just parents trying to navigate a really complex, confusing behavioral health world where they're trying to support their kids and be positive parents, but also still be able to be comfortable with discipline and expectations and standards and fitting in systems that may be a little bit more rigid than anyone would want.
Neal?
Yeah, I'll jump in related to early childhood and the concept of impact. I think humanity has known this for a long time, right? That when we are able to nurture the nurturers, the ones who are caring for our youngest children, we're taking care of our society. Dr. Heckman, I think many people know about this as well. There's something called the Heckman equation from the University of Chicago. He won the Nobel Prize for this. Looked at return on investment to society for different interventions. And the greatest return was in the prenatal and early childhood space, almost 2 to 4 times returns on other good things. So like post-high school job training, that's a great investment for society. It turns out that preschool investment is 2 to 4 times more effective at having an ROI to society. So why is that? What's going on? And I think it took a long time to figure that out until we learned more about genetics and epigenetics, right? And the concept of epigenetics, where we can really surround a child essentially with love, with strong relational health, that's what unleashes the epigenetics of the child. And those opportunities and changes are magnified in the prenatal and early childhood years. So in the wake of the mental health crisis, as we've been working through that, talking with pediatricians across the state, the concept was, well, how do we get in front of this a little bit? it made sense to really focus in on early childhood and specifically early childhood mental health. The heart of that is nurturing the nurturers.
In a lot of ways, it's a little bit of coaching, a little bit of cheerleading, a
Yeah.
little bit of screening. The screening, I think we try to put kids in a space that we can understand what's going on with them and how they're doing in relation to what we predict they would be doing. But ultimately, each child is important as him or herself, and helping to nurture the parents and helping to acknowledge all that they do is one of the great joys of my practice, I know.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about these abstract things like mental health and behavior and figuring out your emotions or how you regulate your emotions, it can feel a little squishy, even though we have really good data showing the impacts of this investment. But when I am talking to like my trainees, for example, and I talk about amblyopia, amblyopia is a great example. How if you screen at the right time and you patch the correct eye, you preserve that vision. But if you aren't providing that nurturance, you can lose acuity in that eye, right? And so, how can the environment we do give people the skills to be able to manage all the hardship that can happen in life, the disappointments, the frustrations, the rejections? And when you can experience those things in childhood, but with love and nurturance, how does it then manifest again and again when you're a teenager, when you're going through your own midlife crisis, and the legacy you're going to leave to your family in your later adulthood, right?
So, Q, what are some of the things that, as you've observed a lot of trainees and observed pediatricians, what are some of the things that you think people do well?
Well, I think, well, I'll say pediatricians. Pediatricians do such a good job of being child centered. We love kids, and there's a certain kind of joy in working with families and with children. And pediatricians also have a lot of cognitive flexibility because without that cognitive flexibility, you can't work with a 15-month-old like 1 minute, and then a 4-year-old the next minute, and then a 17-year-old who's about to go away to college 15 minutes after that, nor manage at the same time all the personalities that might be in the room. So there might be the 4-year-old and her twin sister, and then mom and dad. And so we are a very cognitively flexible group, and we do a really good job of, I think, enjoying the work that we do with families.
And going along with that, if when we're fortunate, that 4-year-old and that 8-year-old and that 17-year-old are often the same person over the course of time. And we've often had the great good fortune of being able to coach parents through all of those stages. And that's a very special thing.
Mhm. Yes, yes.
What-
And I think we're all happy in our jobs. We all love our jobs. Most pediatricians, I always love listening to Neal speak because he brings such centeredness and intentionality around the joy of the work we do. And you walk into a pediatric hospital, people aren't afraid to smile. They aren't afraid to say hello. The walls are bright. People really bring their best selves in a pediatric environment.
Partly because kids are really good at sensing insincerity and they'll call you on it.
Absolutely.
So what are some potential missed opportunities, do you think?
Well, I think, like Neil was saying, we've always kind of done what we've done and we do it pretty darn well. But I don't know if we've always had the chance to think about how we can do it in an intentional and super effective way. So we talk about the art of medicine all the time, but we don't break down what is the art of medicine and how do we model some of the difficult discourse that families may have within themselves. So if you know my work, you know I'm a big proponent of the Mount Sinai Parenting Center curriculum. It's called Keystones of Development. And there are a couple of different principles that are taught over and over again in various developmental stages between the newborn visit up to the 5-year-old visit. And these are things like how to foster autonomy, how to foster attachment, perspective taking, problem solving, and they also include academic knowledge. And what are the ways in which we are mirroring the kind of healthy attachment that can help families come back and see us again and again? When they think, oh, we have a visit with Dr. Q next Tuesday, but there's actually a conflict with X, Y, or Z, but we love going to see her. we're going to cancel the other thing and we're going to keep our appointment with her, right? How many times have we looked at something on your schedule that you're really excited about doing, and you kind of are like, oh, we're going to have to cancel that, and then it takes you 3 months to get it rebooked. So when we show attachment and love to our families and they really pick up on it and absorb it, they get excited about coming to see us. And the kind of advice we give, it hits home in a different way. So like those are some of the things that I think we could probably be a little bit more precise with. And I don't think it has to be hard. I've been using some of these principles in my practice for a good 7 or 8 years now. And I feel like when I go into the office, I'm seeing friends all day long. I love it. I love seeing all my families. The kids jump up to see me. I've even had difficult conversations about vaccinations with families, and I've been able to hold my ground, but in a respectful way, engage with them. And sometimes they've changed their opinions, sometimes they haven't, but they still come back and see me over and over again. And they don't take my advice on that one, but they take my advice on something else. And there will be, I'm just not the person who's going to change their opinion about that particular issue. But I continue to be part of that ambient environment. And my hope is that one day it will swing just a few degrees.
How about some other particular challenges? What can we do in the limited time that we have with things like trauma and isolation and some of the big things with poverty and housing insecurity? How do we make a difference in the small encounters that we have?
Yeah.
I actually really love this question. Her name's Bethel, Bethell. And she has a number of papers that are published, I want to say back in 2019, early 2020s, where she looked at the different, what we call like adverse childhood events, things like poverty or insecurity, like housing instability, stress in the home. And what they found was that when you had a strong sense of family connectedness, the relationships in the family were strong. The kids who had a strong sense of family connectedness did better than the kids who had zero ACEs. And that's something that we can give to every single family, is the knowledge that the ability to buttress the stresses that are outside of our exam rooms, sometimes in our exam rooms, in their homes, in their schools, we can't solve it all, but we can mitigate the impacts of some of that by really fostering love and appreciation of each other, the relationship of the person with one another. And now I'm sort of waxing abstract and philosophical, but the data does show that kind of interconnectedness really buttresses you against stress. And with COVID, we saw the same thing, right? Loneliness really increased some of the adverse impacts of the pandemic.
Neal, you're not only a pediatrician, but you're a healthcare leader. So, as you look at your vision for early childhood mental health in Utah, what is your vision?
I love the conversation so far, and I think you've hit on it really well. The concepts around relational health are at the center of that. And I think one of the strengths of pediatricians in general is we're strong at contextual awareness. We can kind of see what's going on with the family, the context the child's in, and then we sense the relationship we have with the child, with the family, and navigate that. And so really trying to promote that relational health in a family. I like the metaphor of a little tree, like you plant a little tree, and you talked about all the screenings we do. We don't have to do them all the time. It turns out if we space them out over time, we don't have to overload the number of questions, but they can help us pick up the signal. And if you plant a little tree, maybe the leaf is having a little trouble, or that little stem that's going to be a trunk. Oh, there's something there. But it's not just the child, it's also the context. It's the root system, it's the dirt around there. It's like, what's the weather? Are we in a drought right now? What's going on? Can we take all of those contexts and have a strong conversation, a meaningful, a trusting conversation with the family and really optimize that nurturing environment? So I think the vision would be to build a system where we can pick up a signal and then support a family. Because if we can really support the families, love these kids more than anyone else, and they really want the best for them. And if we can pick up a signal anywhere where we can support them, both on the let's help with some challenges and hey, here's some examples of some nurturing. I feel like we have the best chance at unleashing the joy and potential of each little kid.
And it's really the joy through the whole family unit, though, isn't it? One thing that really strikes me sometimes is that each child you hope is being raised by the best parents they could possibly have. And our job is, I think, both to teach how to do that, but also to give them the understanding that we believe in them, that we know they're doing the hard work.
Yeah, this is another area where I like kind of the metaphor with a plant or a tree. There's a concept that good enough parenting is better than perfect parenting. And I really like that concept. So a tree needs wind, it needs resistance, it needs a little bit of dry times in order to bolster its ability to be resilient. Kids are like that too. I think it's important for parents to understand they don't have to be perfect. It's hard to even know what that means. But if we're trying to support that innate sense of nurturing that they have, understand signals of stress and support them, understand opportunities for promoting nurturing and do that, and walk with them along the way. I mean, I feel like then we're really trying to make a difference in the long term for that child's health.
As you look around, what gives you hope?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is just children themselves. Children are fundamentally resilient. They figure things out so much and so well. And if we can support that environment as best we can, I think they kind of do the rest. I really do. And that's one thing that gives me hope. The second is that in my experience, all, maybe nearly all, parents are uniquely designed to be the ones to unleash that in their own child, and they want to. And I think we have the fun job of coaching and supporting again, hopefully removing some barriers for them. And then third, and then I'd love to hear what Q has to say about that, but I think our society is realizing this too. I mean, the fact that we're all uniting, I think I see this across our society, at least here in Utah, on the concept of early childhood. And what can we do to understand the strain and stresses of the nurturers and nurture the nurturers so they can bring that joy and that life and that love to their little children? I think that's pretty exciting. So the children themselves, their families, and then our society, I find hope in those things.
How about you, Q?
One of the things I love is that children are so malleable. And like Neal said, they are so resilient. But I think they're also so genuine. I think that's why we love them. They're so transparent about the things they want sometimes. It's such a joy to work with that kind of transparency sometimes. But one of the things that I hope we can get to, and you see pendulum swinging one way or the other all the time, but one of the things I hope is that we can move into a space where we can model these concepts of rupture and repair. Elisa Pressman, who's one of my colleagues, she does another podcast, Raising Good Humans. She talks about rupture and repair all the time. And when I think about the tree analogy and its need for resistance and wind and hardship to really make it tough, I think about a kid who's having a tantrum. It's having a really rough day and they're having a meltdown. And positive parenting isn't stepping in and saving them from that moment. It's being in a space to let them do it. And then that moment is over, and gosh golly, the ground is still underneath my feet. I still have half a cookie, not a whole cookie. My mom is still there, ready to give me a hug. Grandpa's coming in a second and taking me to the park. And I think when you give people the chance to endure hardship, but also come through on the other side and write a narrative that is cohesive and about themselves, it powers them forward into even harder and harder things. So we, as a community, need to be able to model discomfort and how to go through that discomfort, but still recognize each other as really wonderful human critters. Humans are humans. And we keep evolving so that we're better in the future than we are today. And that growth can be uncomfortable and hard, but it's also okay to do it when you are loved and in a supported community. And doesn't mean that being loved means that it's always like easy, right? Easy and love are different things.
Let me ask you both sort of a vision question. So, if we were having this conversation 10 years from now, what would you hope to have seen in terms of what we do and what we do better? You want to start with that one, Neal?
Sure. I would like to see us have a way that we can have a system that, I don't know if it has to be completely standardized, but generally understood across our society, where we're trying to understand the context that a child's starting to grow in, right from when they're born, and even a mom in the prenatal period, and really take very seriously what's that environment like? What is the risk there for toxic stress? What are the strengths in relational health that exist? How can we mitigate some of the stresses and promote some of the strengths in that relational health? In a society that's really aware of that, again, right from the prenatal period, right in those early days right after birth, so that we're really supporting families. One would imagine in a pediatrician's office that we would have an efficient way to pick up a signal, and then we'd have a community to be able to connect with to respond. One could even imagine policy changes where maybe families of young children have more opportunity with leave policies, for example, to really be present and support each other and their little child. So I would love to see this momentum that we have now continue further, both in real practical ways in the way we function as pediatricians, in the way we connect with the community with strong investment in early childhood resources, and frankly, having it really go into policy where we're very serious about supporting parents of really young children.
Q?
Gosh, I don't know if I could top Neil. That was such an exquisite description of what could be in our future. I would probably add just that the systems are very human centered, that we build systems for people and not ask people to try to fit into systems. We were lucky enough to take our first real trip abroad this past spring and took our girls to an old city. So we went to Venice, we went to Florence, and one, we were on vacation. So I'll start with that caveat. But two, the streets are small, the alleys are narrow, you're face to face with people who are in the neighborhood. You're not in these large environments that require a car to go from one place to another. And with that human interaction, there's just so much joy and such a sense of community when you are shoulder to shoulder with your fellow human critter. And can we design health systems to also feel that way? That it isn't a touch between a machine and you all the time, but a touch between humans. And it doesn't feel so much that the machines are stitching us together as much as we are stitching ourselves together with the support of the machines in the background. So that's sort of my bit of addition to that. I think we have the potential to do it. I think we have people who really believe in the sort of a transformative moment that can be possible in medicine. And as I think things are starting to kind of show some of the foundational cracks that we've been living with, we have an opportunity to say, can we fix this? And when we fix this, what is better? What are the things we really want in our systems? And fight and advocate for that.
Let me ask one last question to both of you. One of the real challenges I think that we all face in many dimensions is the issue of where we get our information, where we get our reinforcement. And in the current world, there's an increasing challenge, I think, to parents, I think to kids. And I think it's our job to help with that. And I'm talking here about things like social media, that what people hear is often a kind of perfectionism that's unrealistic. It's information that's loud but not necessarily accurate, and it's impersonal in all the worst ways. How do we help families to navigate that in a way that instead builds family relations, builds confidence, and builds more relationship and love? Q, do you want to start this one?
Yeah, I think this is a really profound question. I mean, social media gets quite a rap. And for me, it isn't just social media, it's the algorithms behind social media. And whenever you get a new toy, you play with it, and then you realize what does this toy give you and what does this toy not give you, right? And I think we're at a stage of ripening where we are realizing this toy that we've been playing with has its limits. And there's a sort of a fighting back. Neal and I are both fans of The Anxious Generation. Jonathan Haidt did a great job talking about how technology and the breakdown of relationships can really impact you. And something that he did recently, another project he did in follow up, and I think you guys had a podcast on this, is the book The Amazing Generation. And he had paired up with a children's book author
Yes.
to write a graphic novel. And embedded all through it is humans taking back their lives. And when I was reading that book, one of the things I really loved about it, it was about technology and screens, but it was also about the relationship you're developing with your future self. And are the things in front of you helping you get closer to that human or farther away from that human? And I think as a society, as a community, we're starting to recognize that the technology we have is actually taking us away from the human and the community that we want to be. And we're starting to take some of that back. We have a seventh grader, and there's a strong sense of desire from families to limit how much technology is in our children's lives. It wasn't like, yeah, let's just automatically get them a smartphone. The rise of brick phones, people are going back to technology that allows them to compartmentalize and have limits so that they get to have space for other things in their lives. I think we're all kind of at that point now where we're realizing how important it is, which we weren't maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Neal?
Well, two things. One, if I can request our host, Paul, to answer your own question. I know you've been thinking about that. I would love to hear what you have to say. Two, I love what Q said. And I think that one of the key components of an early childhood vision or strategy is that we take this head on, or frankly, right at birth, or even in the prenatal period, where we're giving information about the impact of these kinds of interfaces with screens and technology. It's quite difficult when we're sitting down in an exam room with a 13-year-old that has a smartphone and is scrolling when you walk in the room to have a conversation about reducing screen time than it would be if that family has that messaging all the way along, like right from birth, with the data that supports, hey, human connections are what really unleashes this whole thing, this whole idea of early childhood impact and epigenetic optimization, however you want to say it. It's about human relationships and love and being present and all of those things. That's what works. So I think that has to start right from the beginning in order to really be effective. So that's going to be critical in the early childhood strategy. Now, Paul, if you don't mind, it was a really good question. I'm afraid I didn't answer it. Q did a great job, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think for me, it's even more discouraging when there's a parent on a smartphone through much of the visit. And I'm a big believer in just trying to connect, that only connect, I think, is the foundation of what we do. One thing that I always try to tell parents, this sounds unrelated, but it sort of cuts to the core of this a little bit. When something goes well in a family, I always tell the parents, you got to take credit for this because you're going to take the blame for everything that doesn't go well. And so you've got to own every one of your successes because I think each parent is in his or her own way trying to do a good thing. And I think reinforcing that, helping people to insulate themselves from the perfectionism that used to just come from, well-meaning relatives and neighbors. And now it's people you don't know who are either well-meaning or sometimes trying to monetize a kind of perfectionism through the algorithms, as Q points out, that I think are become in a very great way a thief of our joy. And I think that especially when parents ask about what electronics mean in a family, my advice is usually, I think the first thing we have to do as parents is decide what our approach is going to be to that. And then to try to come up with a consistent way to introduce that to their kids as well. But each one of us, I think, has to use our adulthood to try to master that. And I say that for myself too, that I think we're all in a grand experiment. And I think that we're sometimes losing the algorithms. And that didn't mean much of anything. So anyway, thank you
That was
both.
awesome, Paul.
Thank you both for your wisdom today. Thanks for all that you do in so many ways to make the world a better place for kids and to make the practice of pediatrics more meaningful. We appreciate you taking the time. Thanks to our listeners for taking the time. Please tell your friends and relatives and neighbors about us and see if maybe the algorithm will select us as their next best listen. We'll look forward to another topic next week. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Q.
Thanks for joining us. We look forward to getting together again next time. The Virtual Curbside is available on iTunes or wherever you find your other favorite podcasts. Be sure to like us and subscribe. We want you to like us both because we're needy that way and because that will help other listeners like you find us. Check out our website, vcurb.com, for supporting materials, schedules, and other great stuff. The Virtual Curbside is an educational production of the Utah chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. The opinions expressed in this podcast, while carefully considered, are ultimately the opinions of the presenters and not necessarily of the American Academy of Pediatrics or our employers. And remember, the content of this podcast shouldn't be seen as a substitute for seeking actual personal medical care. If this is an emergency, hang up and dial 911. Otherwise, schedule a visit with a caring healthcare provider to try to get to the bottom of your concerns. None of this could happen without Elisa Stoddard, our extraordinary executive director of the Utah AAP. Many thanks to Tim Cosgrove for his help on the website and logo design. Thanks to Phil Wirkus, who composed the theme music. See you next time.